Well, good morning and welcome to the Contractor State License Board headquarters in Sacramento. My name is Rick Lopes, R-I-C-K-L-O-P-E-S. I am the Chief of Public Affairs for the board. And the reason we're here today is we're here to announce the results of a undercover sting operation series that we conducted this week around the state of California. First, a little bit of background is the Contractors Board is the state government agency responsible for regulating California's construction industry. We license more than 280,000 contractors in 43 different licensing categories. Every year the Contractors Board gets about 20,000 complaints. About 75% of them against licensed contractors, 25% against unlicensed contractors, and we're responsible for enforcing the laws against both licensed and unlicensed contractors. And as part of our enforcement efforts, we've got our statewide investigative fraud team, or SWIFT, and what they are mostly responsible for is proactive action against unlicensed contractors. And the biggest tool we've got, and the most successful tool we have for doing that, is undercover sting operations. And our SWIFT team conducts an average of one sting somewhere in California every week. And 3 times a year, our SWIFT folks come together and we conduct multiple simultaneous sting operations. And that's exactly what happened this week. It's our California Blitz for the summer. This week, we conducted a total of 8 different simultaneous sting operations this past Tuesday and Wednesday in 8 different cities around California. Here in Northern California, we conducted stings in Rockland and South Lake Tahoe. In Central California, we conducted stings in Los Banos, Bakersfield, and Atascadero in San Luis Obispo County. And in Southern California, we conducted sting operations in Apple Valley, Artesia, and Corona. And here we're going to be announcing the results of that operation. Now, during the 8 different sting operations, the Contractors Board arrested a total of 97 different people for contracting without a license. Actually, 94 of those people received what's called a notice to appear. They're going to be required to go to court to answer misdemeanor charges. In 82 of those cases, there was also an illegal advertising. So let me kind of run down those numbers for you. A total of 97 people were arrested. 94 of those people received a notice to appear for misdemeanor charges of contracting without a license. 82 of those people also have a charge that they'll be facing, which is illegal advertising. And I'll get into some of the background of what those charges mean. 10 of the people we arrested also requested an excessive down payment for the work, and we'll talk about that as well. We also issued 2 stop orders for contractors who came out with employees but no workers' compensation. But what was particularly disturbing about the sting operation, and it is a real takeaway, and it's something that we're all very concerned about, is just the level of criminal action some of these people that we caught. Many of them were convicted criminals. Many have a history of serious crimes or drugs and violent crimes. And let me run down that list of you. Out of the 97 people arrested, 11 of those people were repeat offenders, including a few that have been caught by the CSLB within the last 3 months. So these are people that have been caught before, they knew it was against the law, and they determined they were going to continue to go out and break the law. 4 of the people we arrested are registered sex offenders. 4 of the people have active arrest warrants out for them. 4 of the people actually were on probation at the time they were arrested, and we actually had 2 former licensees, people who had either let their license expire or in one case had it suspended because they had almost $400,000 in judgments against their license, so they let the license expire and they continued to work underground. And I also want to note that it's really important that consumers understand that every single one of the serious criminal offenders we found were targeted based solely on ads they had on Craigslist. Craigslist is a huge problem for unlicensed contractors. It's a great way for them to compete on a level playing field with licensed contractors. I would urge consumers to be very careful when you're hiring a contractor, especially if you use Craigslist or other sites like that to find a contractor. These unlicensed people are there and they're able to advertise for free and in many cases mislead people about their contractor's license. And as I said, imagine calling somebody off of a Craigslist ad and you end up having a registered sex offender in your house, around your valuables, around your kids, and what's to say they come there and do that work. If you realize some of these people that are out there doing unlicensed contracting, you really would not want to bring them into your house. I do want to talk about one of the people that was caught in the Rockland sting because she has a little bit of notoriety attached to her. Her name is Samantha Pham, S-A-M-A-N-T-H-A, last name is P-H-A-M. She is a so-called sweetheart swindler. Now, Ms. Pham got a lot of media attention in the Bay Area last year. She is from Elk Grove, which is here in the Sacramento area, but she was convicted last year in Santa Clara County of elder abuse and an allegation of aggravated white-collar crime. She took advantage of an elderly gentleman, got him to believe that she was his fiancée. She was able to get close with him, get him to buy her a more than $70,000 luxury vehicle, to give her a lot of money, which she apparently paid towards her considerable gambling debts, and actually got this elderly gentleman into a position where he lost his house because of all the money that he gave her. She was convicted last year in Santa Clara County and was currently on probation. So when the Contractors Board received complaints against her, she currently has a storefront that she has in Rockland called Bella's Kitchen and Bath, where she's actually advertising that she's a full-service construction company for home remodels, which is against the law. So when we started receiving complaints against her, we decided to set her up in the sting operation. And so we had a meeting in her storefront, got a lot of the information. She actually broke some of the laws there, and we decided we would bring her out to our sting operation and actually get her placed under arrest. And that's exactly what happened. In the video that we've got that we've distributed to you and is available to the media, you actually do have shots of her being placed under arrest, some of the processing process, then you have her actually being taken away to jail. She will face felony charges. One of the things she did is she did have a contractor's license on her business cards. Even though it was not her license, it was a licensed contractor that she worked with to do installation, but the way she was advertising, that was illegal, and it was implying that she was a licensed contractor. So that potentially is going to be a felony charge against her for using somebody else's license. And there's a good chance that she may have violated her probation because of that, and as a result she could end up going to jail or prison. So that was one of the people caught here in the Rockland sting. I do really want to emphasize some of the people that are really scary that we got invited to this sting operation. Actually, some of our seasoned investigators who have been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years were really disturbed by the fact that there were sex offenders. There were one case, there was a guy who had was on probation for arson and making terrorist threats. So some of these people, and one person was high on meth. He went the test there and was high on meth. There's some pretty scary people that are working out there without a license, and consumers need to know that you don't know who you're hiring when you have these unlicensed people come to your house. I wanted to spend a few moments and talk about some consumer tips, because there really are some very simple things that all consumers should do when they're looking to do any kind of home improvement work. The best thing and most important thing to know is that any job that is more than $500 in labor and materials, the person doing the work has to have a California contractor's license. Now, they can't take this job and they break it down into a bunch of $499 pieces. They can't go and say, you pay me $20 an hour, or any of those kinds of things to get by the law. If the entire job, if it's more than $500 in labor and materials, they must have a contractor's license. So if you're looking to have somebody come out and do work at your house, that's the first thing you want to know, is they need to have a license, so you want to find out license information. Now in California, chances are you're probably going to find these people from some kind of an ad, whether it be on Craigslist, Yelp, any one of these websites. If you have a little flyer that shows up on your front door in a bag with little pebbles, if you see an ad in the newspaper, you see a truck driving down the road, the law in California says they must have their contractor's license number on that advertisement. So even before you call them out, you want to look for that contractor's license number, and you want to go to our website, checkthelicenseFirst.com. You want to check them out and make sure they've actually got a license that's in good standing with the Contractors Board. There's a lot of information you'll find by just typing in that number and getting the information for that license. You'll find out about things like workers' comp insurance. You'll find out about their bond. You'll find out a lot of important information that's good to know. So the first thing, even before you call them out, we encourage you to check out their license, make sure. And then when you do, we encourage you to get at least 3 bids, and don't necessarily go with the cheapest bid. You want to find maybe the person who's in the middle, because if you've got somebody who's a lot cheaper than the other people, you got to ask yourself, why can this person do the job for so much less? Are they going to use inferior products? Are they going to find ways to cut corners? Are they going to rip me off? Because what you see in many cases is they're going to ask you for a large down payment up front. They're going to get a lot of money out of you, and then what's to say they're actually even going to show up to do the job? Unlicensed contractors are notorious for undercutting people by a long way just to get a big down payment and then never show up for the job. And speaking of down payments, it's important for consumers to know that you never want to pay a huge down payment up front. The law in California is very specific. It says that a down payment should be no more than $1,000 or 10% of the job, whichever's less. So if you've got a $2,000 job, your down payment should be no more than $200. So if you've got, in a lot of cases, I need half the money up front, I got to buy the materials. Anybody who's asking you to do that, that should be a clear red flag to you that they're going to try to rip you off. Now they may be very legitimate in saying I need help buying the materials, but are you going to want to hire somebody who doesn't even have credit with his suppliers? If he does a lot of work, he should have some kind of credit with his suppliers, even if he has a credit card that he pays at the end of the month. Or if you're a consumer and he says, you know, I need this money to buy the materials, say, you know what, I'll go there with you to the material supplier, I'll pay for it, and then you take the stuff. Or you're there when the materials are delivered to your house, and then that's when you pay them. And you want to issue a two-party check if there's any doubts. You want to write it to both the contractor and to the material supplier. Some very simple things you can do to protect yourself. Don't give the contractor or unlicensed contractor a big down payment up front, because once you do that and you have a problem, it's much more difficult to get that money back than it is not to give it to them in the first place. We also want to say it's real important. We've talked a little bit about the online things like Craigslist and Yelp. We would encourage consumers not to just go based on any one website, whether it be the BBB, Yelp, any kind of the services out there, Angie's List, anybody who does reviews. You don't want to just go with one website. You want to kind of do enough research and find out different things, because it's not unheard of that people can go out there and plant their own reviews on there or do things to affect how they're being reviewed. So we would encourage you not to solely go based on one or even two websites. As far as the payments too, in addition to the down payments, we'd also want consumers to know that you should not, and the law says in California, that you should not pay for any material or work before the work is done or the materials are delivered. So if you're getting into the job, maybe you did make that small down payment, but then once the job started, they start wanting you to make payments before the work is done. Again, you're just setting yourself up for problems in case you have a problem with your contractor. Again, it's much more difficult to get that money back once you've given it to the contractor. So do not give the contractor money for work before it's done, and don't give it to them for materials before they're delivered. And don't make the final payment before the job is done to your satisfaction, because once you do it, it's much tougher if you've got a problem to get that contractor to come back out to fix any problems you have. Workers' compensation is another huge issue, and not only do we see this with the unlicensed contractors, we do see it with licensed contractors. So consumers, no matter who you hire, it's important to understand that if they've got any workers coming out to do work on your property, they're required by law to have workers' compensation insurance. What that means is if they get hurt while they're on your property, they're going to be covered. If somebody doesn't have workers' comp insurance and they get hurt on your property, there is a good chance they're going to come after you to pay their medical bills. And so it's something that a lot of consumers don't think about and don't necessarily take the contractor's word for it that they actually have coverage. A good contractor is going to give you a copy of that policy with the information, let you contact the company, make sure that they have it. And you also want to make sure if there's going to be 10 workers out on your property that they've got a workers' comp policy that covers 10 workers. Sometimes contractors can go and they can get a minimum policy for maybe 1 or 2 workers. So you don't necessarily want to take anybody's word for it that they've actually got the correct workers' comp insurance. Another areas you want to ask about is general liability insurance. While it's not required by law, we'd recommend that you would hire contractors who carry this. Whereas workers' comp covers employees if they're hurt, the general liability insurance will cover damage that's done to your property. Let's say they back up into your garage door, they do some kind of damage. That's going to cover. So that is a question that you want to ask about. Now it's important to know too is, we're talking a lot about consumer protection, but it's important to know too that the unlicensed contractors also make it extremely difficult for the legitimate contractors to compete. Many times they're going to come in and they're going to undercut the legitimate licensed contractors because they're cutting corners. They're not paying their taxes. They're not, in some cases, not even paying their workers a minimum wage. And so it's a real problem for the legitimate licensed contractors, and that's another reason why it's important that we take action against these unlicensed contractors. They contribute something in California that's called the underground economy. Right now, before we take some questions, I'd like to have James Goldstein, who is the undersecretary at the, I'm going to say this because I always get this wrong, it's the Business and Consumer Services and Housing Agency. So James Goldstein's the undersecretary, and actually he's a former registrar here of the Contractors Board, so he's got a real good knowledge about some of the issues we've talked about. But he's just going to give you a little perspective on the administration's feeling about the work that we're doing and the importance of going after the underground economy. James.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. I want to echo a couple of the points that Rick was pointing out. First of all, for consumers, they need to remember to check the Contractor State Licensing Board website to make sure anybody that they hire is properly licensed. That ensures that the people that they're working with, the businesses that they hire, are properly insured, that they pay their workers, that their workers have workers' compensation insurance, and it levels the playing field for businesses. Because while many consumers know they can save money by hiring somebody from the underground economy, It's not fair for the businesses, and it actually puts them at risk as consumers. If something does happen, a worker gets hurt, or the workmanship is shoddy, they really have no recourse except for small claims court or other legal remedies. If they're working with a licensed contractor, they can contact the Contractor State Licensing Board, and the Contractor State Licensing Board is here to help them. I think events like today are designed to show that the underground economy, the work that's going on there, is just simply not fair to the legitimate businesses who pay their taxes, who pay their workers properly, who have the insurance, and it's certainly not fair to the consumers who really are expecting that the people who they let into their house are not former criminals, that they have the skills and knowledge to do the work well, and that if there is an issue, there is a way to remedy it and resolve it. So thank you for being here today, and I'll give it back to Rick.
Thank you, James. And the other good point is for consumers to realize one of the other problems when you do hire an unlicensed contractor is if you do have a problem, many times these people are just working with a cell phone out of the back of a pickup truck. Or in many cases, they may not even have a truck. They have all their tools stuffed into their trunk or something like that. If you do have a problem with an unlicensed contractor, in most cases your only remedy is to try to take them to small claims court if you can even find them. Again, they just have a cell phone many times, and good luck trying to find them, especially if they've got a caller ID and they know it's you calling. If you do have a problem with a contractor who is licensed, the Contractors Board is here. You can file a complaint, we can investigate. 70% of the complaints we get against licensed contractors, we can take care of at a very low level. Usually there's some kind of a disagreement or an issue about payments or something. We can usually work to get both sides together. The other important thing I wanted to note is our goal here, while we're trying to arrest these people and stop them from what they're doing, our goal isn't necessarily to put them out of work. Some of these people that we did arrest, quite frankly, could be legitimate and good licensed contractors. The goal for them is to get them a license and to get them on board. So in all of these cases, we've got application packages, and we tell them we'll do whatever we can to help them actually get their license and get legitimate. And just because somebody gets busted in a sting operation doesn't mean they can't get a license. Our last thing we want to do is to drive them further underground. We want them to get on board, and we want them to get their license, and we want them to follow the rules and to make it a level playing field. The one last thing before we take some questions I wanted to note is the Contractors Board is what's called a special fund agency. We don't receive any money from California citizens from their taxes. All of our money, fees are paid for their license fees. So we are completely paid for by the construction industry as a consumer protection agency. And I think that's important to know that is our number one goal, is protecting consumers. So it's important, and I'd like to open it up if we have any questions here about the operation. Yeah, for those of you watching online, the question's about a little bit more about the underground economy. Well, it's estimated that there's probably somewhere between $60 and $140 million a year going through the underground economy. And the great amount of this is from companies. Let's take, for example, let's play out a scenario. You've got an unlicensed contractor. He hires some workers, he goes down to a local, one of the big box stores and picks up somebody to hire him for the day. Chances are he's not going to have any kind of a business license. He's not going to have a contractor's license. He's not going to have any kind of insurance on those workers. He's paying the workers in cash under the table, so he's not withholding payroll taxes. So those are all things that contribute to the underground economy. These are costs that legitimate businesses have, and there's protections. It's not just a way for the state to make money or for things like that. There is a reason and a purpose and a service that is there that you get for that. And so this person is going to be competing against a legitimate contractor by undercutting him. So they're contributing to this underground economy, and that takes away from the kinds of things that our taxes do go to pay for, whether it be police officers, some of the services. The less money that we have as the state to pay for those kinds of things, the less services that we're all going to have. And the other part that makes it really tough is you're competing against these people who don't have, for example, workers' comp insurance. What happens as a result is the legitimate contractors have to pay a lot more for their insurance because they have to pay for all the people who aren't insured. So if you actually had more people insured, the insurance costs would go down for everybody. So it's not just that it's a very easy way for these people to try to sneak around and go under the radar, and it really does. It's not a very sexy thing, but it really does hurt a lot of people in a lot of serious ways.
Does that include the workman's comp losses?
Those numbers would not include that. Most of that, what comes into that is that's just the money that exchanges hands. You hire somebody, you give them $1,000 to do some kind of a job. You've got that $1,000 as exchange. So you've got $1,000 there. They may pay the worker $100. All that kind of money, that's where that kind of money adds up, those direct costs of working without a license and without any paying taxes. Sure. What happens in a sting operation is we pose as a homeowner. We're very much just like you would do if you would call a contractor out to your house. Many of the people we identified in our sting were from ads on Craigslist. Again, that's a very fertile place. In some cases, we identified them from, we have sting files. Whenever we have complaints filed against unlicensed contractors, that information will go into our sting file. If people have their licenses taken away, if we have tips coming in, many times licensed contractors know who they're competing against, they'll let us know. So we've got a wide variety of things to figure out who to target in these operations. So what we do is we call them out if we have seen an ad or have some reason to believe they're working. If they're, let's say that they're doing concrete work, we call them out and say we need a bid for a certain kind of concrete job. So what you're going to see in the videos, you're going to see people coming out and doing measurements, the kinds of things they would do in order to give us a bid for a job. Then you see us identifying, once we get a price from them, you see us identify ourselves as being with the state, and we also have law enforcement as backups. They identify themselves that it's a sting operation. You then see the people then are being handcuffed as the officers check to see if they have any outstanding warrants against them. As I mentioned, a number of the people did actually have outstanding arrest warrants. We find out just who they are. Then they're processed. We go through, we explain to them what's happened, the purpose for the sting. We explain to them the importance of trying to get a contractor's license and what happens for them next. And in one case, on the video, you see the one woman, Samantha Pham, actually getting taken out to a police vehicle to be transported to jail. So those are the kind of things you see in that video. Okay. We got any other questions? Those of you watching online, we will be putting an archive version of this press conference on if you need to